right, we're live here with Dr. Longo of Old World, Florida. Is that your channel?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, awesome. I haven't watched all your stuff, so you have tons of stuff on there, and it's long, but great, great work on like alternative history. No, is that what you call it? Maybe like deeper dig in history. A lot of the history we have, there's so many holes in it. Like, you're stupid if you think everything you're taught in history is true, you know? So guys like you are just trying to look at different alternatives. And I think for the most part, you're not like, hey, this is definitely the case. You just try to show holes and why things look. It's what's funny is I brought you on thinking, you know, this can be a totally different guest. And then we started talking about topics, and a lot of topics happen to be about, that we're going to discuss today, happen to be about Jewish people. Next time I'm going to bring you on, we're going to go a totally different direction. Maybe a Garden of Eden or something you mentioned.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Something, but you know what? The topics you sent me looked really interesting, or topics we talked about looked really interesting. So let's start off. Well, the first, there's so many Jews in Florida. What
Yeah.
what do you think the reason is, and why do they love Florida so much?
Totally. You know, that's kind of, I guess, you know, what we're going to have a good time talking about is, it's not kind of what I started off studying in depth, you know, Jewish history or anything, but I'm from Florida. My channel is very big on Florida history, and just scraping into Florida history a little, you realize it's very interconnected with Jewish history in America, and there's a lot of good in that, there's a lot of bad in that, and I'd say a big thing that I want to do is kind of clear up some misconceptions. You know, I love a lot of Jewish people and that, but I don't like getting gaslit about our history either.
Exactly.
And so let's clear up some misconceptions, and Florida history is a great way to start because American history actually starts in Florida. You know, the whole revolution and all that with England, that's really like America's puberty.
Mm-hmm.
The birth really starts off in the West Indies, as we call it. Florida, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico. You know, that's where Columbus sailed into. And that's a good place to start, but just back to your question, why do the Jewish people like it in Florida so much? There's a bunch of answers to that question, but I'll try and focus on the ones that excite me the most and I think are most surprising to people. Just starting off, you know, Christopher Columbus was Jewish, and that's pretty much established fact now. You know, it's been theorized for hundreds of years. Rabbis and conspiracy theorists alike have always, you know, claimed Columbus was Jewish. Whether he was a Marrano, a Converso, a crypto Jew, you know. The context is everything with Columbus, you know. Columbus was essentially escaping a Spanish expulsion, right? The Spanish Inquisition. They were expelling the Jews from Spain.
That was literally 1492. Wasn't that the year that Jews were expelled?
Yes, totally. They had just kicked out the Moors. So Spain wasn't Spain for a long time. It was conquered by the Muslims. They had to kick the Muslims out before they could get Spain as we know it today. And when they did that, there was a lot of Jews in the country who thought that they were going to get to stay. But as soon as they kicked the Moors out, they kind of switch up a little bit. The writing was on the wall, but they decided to switch up and say, all right, now the Jews have to go too. And basically, Columbus, not many people know this, he starts his very first journal and diary, you know, of his story, of his first voyage in the Americas. He starts it off with either the sentence or it's in the first paragraph. Very first paragraph, maybe the first sentence. On the day that the Jews were expelled from Spain, I departed for the New World.
Wow.
So we're going to take it pretty...
Clearly relevant to him.
We're going to take it pretty far back. A lot of people talk about Columbus being Jewish. A lot of people talk about... Right. No one really talks about what he was motivated by. It wasn't just he had to get out of town, right? Because he ended up, you know, essentially earning Spain a lot of real estate and, you know, goods and all that. Columbus was driven by prophecy. There's a great book out there called The Lost Prophecies or the Book of Prophecies by Christopher Columbus. This was made towards the end of his life. And, I was kind of telling you on the phone, one of the reasons people suspected Columbus was Jewish for so long was that he essentially quotes from the Old Testament almost every other sentence. He's totally in this Old Testament mindset. He uses words like Christendom and Christianity and, spreading the word of the church and all that. But you can tell he has an Old Testament, kind of framework in his heart.
Which is the holy book.
Well, yeah, of course, with the Talmud and
the New Testament is the ones that Christians should look up to, and then it's a very interesting.
Yeah, the New Testament almost kind of looks at a lot of the Old Testament as a problem, and the New Testament is the solution. Mm-hmm. They kind of ignore the solution and kind of double down on the problems. But we can talk about that later. Your question is, why do they like it so much in Florida?
Yeah,
I would say we have to actually take it back to Columbus first.
Interesting.
Columbus's writings show he wanted to come to maybe, some people say he thought it was Asia. I think he might have just been leading on about that, kind of making people think that. Mm-hmm. But essentially, he believed, and he wrote this in his own words, people can go see. He believed the Garden of Eden was in America, in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. People forget Columbus essentially almost landed in Florida. He landed in the Bahamas. Where he landed was twice as close to Florida as it was to South America. But for some reason, they always try and push it down as if he never came anywhere close to North America. He actually may have came within sight of Florida. He was on the northern coast of Cuba, we know that for sure.
Yeah, that's right there.
So what was Columbus looking for? He was looking for Eden. On his first voyage, he brought Hebrew translators, made a point of it, Arabic and Aramaic translators, and those were crypto Jews too. So his ship was teeming with crypto Jews, because they were looking for a new world.
There was lots of crypto Jews because they were fleeing basically persecution, correct? So they kind of had to pretend like they were Christians, or they would have been like kicked out or potentially killed even. I don't really know exactly what they were doing.
Yes, that's correct. It was the Spanish Inquisition that really intensified after they kicked out the Moors, the Reconquista. They reconquered all of Spain.
Do you know why they're being kicked out, or no? I don't know
the Jews.
They've been kicked out of a lot of places. I don't know why they're kicked out of Spain.
Well, history will probably tell you, mainstream will probably tell you, a combination of that. With the king and queen owed them so much money that's kind of what would always happen in medieval history is, and even some of the pagan rulers would do this before Christianity was very widespread. They would essentially borrow all this money, get locked into debt, get locked into fractional reserve banking, usury, those tricks. Yep. And after a couple hundred years or so, maybe less, they would say, well, screw it. We're just not going to pay him back and kick him out. So that's kind of the more comfortable way that it's explained sometimes. Another part of it would totally be the accusations of, blood sacrifice. Not only animal, perhaps worse than animal sacrifice.
They're accused of killing children everywhere they've gone. I'm certainly not saying that's true, but everywhere they've gone, they've been accused of kidnapping, torturing, and draining the blood of children.
And, in their defense, we will say the Catholics were pretty superstitious and, a little spooked out pretty easily sometimes. Yeah. But that's certainly true, and that's common to almost all the places they've been kicked out of. And I just want to say this, too, up front. As a Christian, I don't have any hate for Jewish people or anything like that. The ones that I do have a big problem with, anybody, Jewish or not, are the people who are in support of blood sacrifice.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if it's human. Animal, human, it's corrupt, it's wrong, it's evil. It's not going to the God they think it is. And that's ultimately what...
Or maybe it is going to the God they think it is, but it's not the God the Christians worship.
Yeah, good point. That's ultimately the aim of the whole Third Temple movement and Zionism as a whole. People think it's just to have a nice place to live. They got a nice place to live. They've always had nice places to live. They want that place for the temple so that they can restart the largest blood sacrifice operation there's ever been on planet Earth. That's a fact.
Just real quick offshoot. I had a guest on. I wish I could remember his name right now. Where we went into the Jesus potentially being a vegetarian and the blood sacrifice of the third temple. Wow, I didn't realize how dark that was. And Jesus was strongly opposed to it. Literally, they had these giant drainage systems because this blood was just flowing out. It was just tens of thousands of animals just killed every day. Brutal. I mean, maybe humans there too. It's just. God, I wish I could remember the guy's name because it was a great interview.
Cam Waters. He's a good friend.
Thank you so much, Cam Waters. Oh, yeah. Oh, Cam put me in touch with you. That's right.
Yeah, and Owen.
That's how I got in touch with you. Yeah, I know, and that's right. Yeah, no, that was an excellent interview I had with Cam. It was like so fascinating. I was just like,
he's great.
Yeah,
his documentary Christspiracy is really good. It's
one of my favorite ones. I'm vegetarian. It's one of the favorite ones I've watched in vegetarianism because it was completely different. I went to watch it right before I interviewed him, and I was just hooked, like trying to finish it before the interview. Just like, wow, this is like, I just put it on 1.5 speed to like try to get through it. I'm just like, didn't want to stop watching. Just fascinating. Yeah, people, if you enjoy this interview, I highly recommend you check out the Cam Waters one as well, and his movie Christspiracy. Anyways, we're going to the sacrifice.
And, I also want to share. I applaud your vegetarianism. I'm also a vegetarian.
Oh, wow.
I love that about you. It's a big core tenet of mine and a driving, motivation for all this learning and philosophy is all the greatest philosophers there's ever been have been vegetarians. You prove some of the greatest athletes there's ever been have been vegetarians. Some of the greatest opponents to Zionism, Jewish supremacy, animal sacrifice, blood sacrifice, have been vegetarians.
The biggest person against
and
worldwide Jew.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, just real quick, we're going to have to choose between two futures. As Christians, as Americans, as people on Earth. You're either going to choose the wolf laying with the lamb and the lion eating straw, or you're going to choose thousands of years of animal sacrifice because the third temple's kicked off. And that's your New World Order, or you got the wolf lying with the lamb and the lion eating straw. New World Order. Those are essentially the two forks I see in the future.
People, they sacrifice animals with like the chickens and stuff. That's just totally sick. I'm an animal lover, so I'm glad you are too. It's just that's one reason I never became a Christian. Just the way they talk about animals, and I think maybe that was rewritten in the Bible that we could just do, animals have no feelings and souls, and like you could do what you want to them. I have a hard time relating that because someone who loves animals.
Well, I'd love to talk about that another time too.
Yeah, we'll do another podcast in the future, but let's get back on track. Sorry, that's why shooting you off because that Cam Waters interview is just so fascinating to me. It was one of my favorite interviews, and it did well too. I wasn't sure how my audience. I thought my audience, being the meat eaters, were going to be like, "Oh, screw this guy," and they loved it.
Yeah, shout out to Cam. But let's try and connect Columbus to Florida a little bit, okay? Christopher Columbus, right off the bat, his initials CC 33, whatever, not the biggest, red flag in the world, but it's something to take notice of. He changed his name a lot.
Interesting.
He shows up in the Bahamas, which is just off the coast of Florida. If those Bahamas weren't there, he may have very well sailed right into Florida. Those islands stopped him, essentially. But it takes about 20 years from 1492 to 1512 when someone actually sets foot on Florida and claims it for a European colony. But what happens between then? Columbus, who never finds Florida and allegedly never saw it, he's fervently looking for the Garden of Eden in the Caribbean. He's hearing Hebrew words in the Native American languages. As soon as he gets there, he's recording this and stuff. There's records of him potentially even seeing circumcision. Okay, how he found that out, I don't know what he was looking for, but
that's a weird thing to stumble across.
He makes note of things like that, and his kind of second in command, who's helping him with his journals, noticed a lot of this too. So they're hearing Hebrew, they're seeing what he thinks are Hebrew traits, and
This is like early, like what year? Say 1500?
1492, 1493.
This was the first time he landed, yeah.
Literally. People don't talk about this. He's not talking about Christianity and all this stuff. He's talking about how they have Old Testament roots and how he thinks he's getting warmer and warmer.
He's actually saying this in his journals.
Oh, 100%. I can pull out
Wow.
some. Let me pull out some quotes here.
This is so fascinating. No, like the work I saw, I was fascinated with. That's why I'm glad I got you on. It's just so crazy, and it's stuff that's documented.
It is documented, and I've got a big connection with Moses too in 1492 that no one talks about. It all has to do with this messianic prophecy. This is the beautiful thing, is it all ties in together. What's the commonality between all this? Zionism and a messianic prophecy that involves America. Essentially, Columbus believed America had to be conquered before the Messiah could come, the Jewish Messiah. He wrote that in his books.
It's crazy. This is very relevant today.
Yes, and this is why they're recently saying Columbus was Jewish. I think it's true, but the reason they're pushing it so hard now, or kind of unveiling it, is I think they're going to try and go back and say, America's always been Jewish. Like, this is our place. Like, they might pull a move like that.
That's probably what they're going to say. It's a Jewish country.
But essentially, starting off with Columbus, he wasn't the only person. Amerigo Vespucci also thought that paradise was located somewhere in this newly discovered portion of the Americas. And people say that's who we get America from. That's disputed, but he did say this, that he suspected paradise was nearby. And they actually believed this. They knew what the Middle East was, and they did not think the Garden of Eden was there. They knew that Jesus lived in Jerusalem, but they did not believe 500 years ago that the Garden of Eden was in Iraq. That's a recent, how would you say this? That's only really like 200 years old. That idea is, as academic fact.
And that's so far away from the Middle East to America.
Exactly. So Columbus is also, he's the first person to suspect the Garden of Eden was in America. He's also the first person to develop what we call the Jewish American Indian theory, that American Indians have some Hebrew lineage way back in the past. And he was obsessed with this. He talked about it in his notebook. On his first journey, he took a Hebrew translator. On his second voyage to the Americas, he wrote, let me get it here. Just one sec, sorry.
No, this is good if people can see things that he actually said. That's the important thing, putting these history things together. You have to show, receipts, and that's what I watched some of your videos, and you have receipts on lots of this stuff, or at least some strong circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, on his first voyage, he made a point of bringing Hebrew and Aramaic translators. I'm going to quote a Jewish, Orthodox Jewish historian right here. He says, this is Dr. Henry Abramson, says, quote, "There must be 20 bizarre little cues in Columbus's own journals and writings and things like that, including somewhat fanciful Hebrew origins for the place names that he discovered in the New World." On his second voyage, quote, he believed he was in, quote, the outer regions of earthly paradise. On his third voyage, Columbus was actually using the book of Genesis like a treasure map. Wow. He's like, all right, there's one of the rivers. There's, we found gold over here. That matches, the good gold in Havilah and this and that. He was literally using the Old Testament, the first book in the Bible, as a treasure map to explore the Caribbean. So what's he on to here? He also believed, he wrote this down, on his fourth voyage, he believed he had discovered the gold mines of Ophir, which is the source of King Solomon's treasure, or, gold fleet. And so, yeah, what else?
Yeah, I've never heard any of this. It's so fascinating.
It is pretty
and only using the Old Testament. And why would you bring Hebrew speaking people if you're a Christian? That seems a little odd.
Dude, totally. And also, I've got this 1492 connection where Columbus believed he had been chosen by God to go find a new world and to connect Spain to the Holy Land in Jerusalem, but also the Promised Land that he believed was the original Garden of Eden in America, and that it was lost.
God's chosen person.
He believed that. He quoted and said, "I'm like Moses. God's treating me like Moses. He's treating me like Isaiah." Okay, those are in his journals. Then he also says, in 1492.
Thanks for watching Fight Back Podcast. If you like the show, like, subscribe, or share the video. There's also donation links in the descriptions. As many of you guys know, I run a free speech podcast. That comes as a price. It's being demonetized everywhere. So one way to support the podcast is to buy your books from AntelopeHillPublishing.com. Today's selection is The Trans-Industrial Complex. This book covers the money-making machine of the trans industries and shows it's not to help people, but to make money and get rich. So again, if you want to support the podcast, go to AntelopeHillPublishing.com and be sure to use promo code FIGHTBACK. That'll save you money and support me. Thank you.
Okay, so 1492, we all have that ingrained in our heads in school.
1492,
right?
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Now that's 1492 AD. What happened in 1492 BC?
I don't know.
Would you believe me if I told you that 1491-1492 BC is one of the most commonly proposed dates for the exodus of the Jews from Egypt? Columbus believed he was like mirroring history. Yeah, go ahead.
Do they know where they went from Egypt, or is it not known where they supposedly went from Egypt?
Yeah, so that's Exodus in the Bible. That's the second book of the Bible. The Jews, they're not, I don't know if we can call them Jews at the moment. I guess they're the Israelites in that context. The Israelites get, not kicked out. Moses, the way the story goes, Moses essentially asks permission, and the plagues come, and then Pharaoh lets them go but changes his mind. The amount of parallels between that story and Columbus are astounding, right down to the date. And for most people, they say, oh, that's a coincidence, right? Well, if you're into Kabbalah, that's not a coincidence. This matters a lot. And also, if you're on the 7,000-year timeline of the Earth, like Columbus was, that he wrote in his writings, I believe there's only 7,000 years of Earth left. He believed there's only 150 years left from his timeline till the end of the world. He was wrong about that, but he believed all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of people are really into numerology.
The Usher chronology is one of the most popular chronologies for the Bible. It was printed with the King James Version Bible for a long, long time. It placed the Exodus at 1491 BC. There's many people who place it at 1492, and it's most commonly placed between 1400 and 1500 BC, closer to 1490, of course. So, did Columbus know this? Well, to quote Arnold Garr, who's some scholar that I have this quote from, he said, Columbus's understanding of a divine timetable for the Earth's history gave him a sense of urgency in fulfilling these prophecies. Now, what's crazy is the commonalities between Christopher Columbus and Moses don't end there. Just as Moses had his Hebrew ancestry obscured, he was put in the basket, raised by Egyptians. They didn't know he was an Israelite. A very similar thing happened to Columbus. No one knew where he came from. It's even indicated he didn't know where he came from. He might have had false parents, been passed around between family members a lot. And growing up, he wasn't sure if he was Jewish. By the end of his life, he was pretty positive. And before
he said he changed his name a few times too.
Yeah, but we got to also kind of give the other side. There's so many countries so close together over there in Europe. You'd go one place to the next, and they'd call you something different all the time. So that's not too suspect, but it could be a red flag, depending how you're looking at it.
Yeah, I don't know the time that well, but it seems like a red flag. But like I said, I don't know the time period if people are doing that often. But the name changing thing it seems kind of weird and something that's done quite often today. Yeah.
So both Moses and Columbus had their kind of Hebrew ancestry obscured. Despite being born into persecution, both of them gained audience or kind of access to the court of the highest ruler, the highest court in their land. So Moses is, a nobody in a basket and somehow gets to the highest court in the land. Columbus is the same thing. People don't know where he comes from, but he somehow makes it to the king and the queen, and he can ask them whatever he wants. He can make meetings whenever he wants. So there's all these connections between Moses and Columbus. Moses heard the voice of God, and Columbus claimed to hear the voice of God, kind of egging him on, reassuring him, or admonishing him. Moses had to ask permission to leave. Columbus had to ask permission to leave multiple times, each of them. Both Pharaoh and the Spanish king and queen changed their minds and essentially went after them, both Moses and Columbus. So there's all these connections, and Columbus, he might have been trying to do this on purpose. I have a quote from him that kind of points to that. In 1492, he wrote in his own journal, "The rising of the sea was very favorable to me, as it happened formerly to Moses, when he led the Jews from Egypt." What do you mean? There was no ocean. Moses didn't cross an ocean. Unless you're saying an ocean of sand, like I'm crossing an ocean of water, He's trying to fill the shoes.
So it seemed like he was trying to look like a Moses-like figure.
Yes.
Is it not known like how he really got to the position to be in front of the king and queen, or how is that traced back?
His family was probably pretty rich, and he was able to kind of get a little bit of an education with navigation and all this, so there had to be some money coming from somewhere. He certainly wasn't a peasant.
Yeah.
But we just don't know much. We know that he had red hair, probably. That's kind of a Jewish thing, But
recently it was in the news that he was likely Jewish. What was that based off of? Was it DNA, or what was...
It's been long suspected because he would sign all his letters with a Hebrew character and a little Kabbalistic code. He used Kabbalah and gematria in his letter heading and his signature. And when he died,
for sure, then with everything you said,
yeah, and
close to for sure. You never know certainty, but
the evidence is overwhelming before, and then in the last year or two, they said, "Oh, now we have the DNA of his son and someone that we think might be Columbus himself," and they say, it could be just a plot to kind of claim ownership. Or
I'm not that trustworthy of the DNA, but all the other stuff you're saying seems a lot more likely to me.
Yeah. And the only kind of middle ground or plausible deniability, I guess, would be he's a messianic Christian, where he may have held some Christian beliefs, but he's also deeply rooted in his hidden Hebrew heritage. And there's no denying he believed he was finding a new promised land for the Jewish people. That was his life's mission. He quoted the Old Testament. He compared himself to Moses and Isaiah and all this. And there's all these, connections. Both Moses and Columbus suffered mutinies. Both of them, the supernatural experience, all this stuff. So Columbus believed he had a Jewish prophecy to fulfill, right? And this is actually the same prophecy with the whole third temple and stuff being built today. Is they believed the whole world had to be introduced to Abrahamic religion. So whether that's Christianity or Judaism, or Islam, they believed the God of Abraham had to be spread to the whole world before the Messiah could come, either their fake Messiah or Jesus coming again. But okay, so that's Columbus's primary motivation, and no one ever talks about that. It's all there.
I've never heard this till right now. That's crazy.
People, please go look it up. But it gets crazier because the closer we get to Florida, the closer we get to us in America today and what we call America. 20 years after Columbus makes his first voyage, Ponce de Leon, a Spanish conquistador who was not Jewish, we don't think, but he had a ton of crypto Jews on his boats because back then in the 1500s, in the age of discovery, all the people who were willing to hop on a ship and potentially never see their home again, the first couple batches of those, the first lots of batches, were all crypto Jews who essentially had nowhere to go back to.
So they were trying to flee.
they might have been brave, but they really had no other choice. America represented a whole new beginning to them. Even the Pilgrims and Puritans, or the Pilgrims and Quakers and stuff in like the Northeast, they even, a lot of people think, have Jewish heritage.
Interesting.
The Huguenots were one of the first Protestants to make it to America. They themselves believed as Europeans, German, French, mostly French, Irish, they believed they were also Israelites and that they had to go get to America. And so all these people are on a similar wavelength. Very little of it's driven by gold to start off. It's all religion. It's all promised land,
Prophecy.
New World prophecy. So 20 years later, Florida's discovered. 1513. Juan Ponce de Leon is looking for the fountain of youth. That's the story. And this is kind of a rehashing of the Garden of Eden in Caribbean myth. They kind of narrowed it down to like a fountain that gives you everlasting life, right? But in essence, that's kind of the same myth or core legend as the Garden of Eden, because it's essentially saying a place where there is no death, or a place where there's peace, or a place where you can drink and live forever. Essentially, there's a commonality between the two. Ponce de Leon is looking for the fountain of youth, and he comes to Florida because all the Indians were pointing to Florida and say, that place is special. The water there makes you live longer. The climate makes you live longer. Before Columbus ever got there, there was Indians going by the boatloads to Florida, to retire to Florida.
Really? It was
literally.
Back then, huh?
Seriously, it's a real thing. There was Cuban Indians, Bahamians, all these people were coming to Florida. And the Maya may have even came to Florida to set up a settlement. Juan Ponce de Leon gets there. He's got all these conversos on his ship. About 30, 40 years later, the Spanish start living in Florida. They start setting up towns and cities. The oldest one is... also, going back to Columbus, the day that he landed was a Jewish holiday. It was, I think, Sukkot or Rosh Hashanah.
I don't know the holidays, but that's interesting.
October 10th or something. Yeah, it's a Jewish holiday.
So it's a lot of coincidences. And beyond that, like the things he's writing sounds, signing Hebrew, Old Testament, leaving the day. It seems pretty, very, very, very likely.
It's the festival of Sukkot. Sukkot, as they call it. And the guy who founded St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine, Florida is the oldest city in America. It's the first place that Europeans, settled and have been there ever since. So the Vikings came, 1,000 years ago, but they're not here today. Their descendants left or died out. The Spanish, when they got to St. Augustine, they've been there ever since. And that's the oldest city in America, North America, and we call it Ancient City is the nickname. If you're into the whole old world and Tartaria stuff, St. Augustine, Florida is where you want to look. It doesn't even look like America. It looks like Morocco. It looks like Angkor Wat. It looks like some weird stuff.
Where is that located in Florida?
It's northeast Florida, so kind of close to Georgia. A little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never been out there, so it sounds totally interesting.
Dude, it's got the nicest architecture in America. It's Washington, D.C. and in St. Augustine. Nothing else comes
close.
close.
Check that out. Yeah, it sounds cool.
It's very cool. And some of the first electric buildings in America, too. So if you're into the whole Tartaria stuff, I
haven't gone deep down it. I've gone a little bit of alternative hit, like a Graham Hancock looked at his stuff. I'm fascinated by some of the, like I said, I don't believe a lot of the current history narratives. I think probably was long cultures that are lost we don't know of, but I don't know the details behind it. That's why I'm trying to talk to some interesting guests about history.
We got to be careful with some of the Tartaria stuff. A lot of those people are like full-blown retarded.
And I don't want to bring on like quacks. That's why I look through your work first. I don't want to, because I talk about some very controversial stuff, which people say is conspiracy theories, but the shit I talk about is real. That's why I'm very careful on the history guests that are booking people that are like, that have the receipts, have done the research, that aren't going into quackery, because some of that stuff's a little bit like, it can be fun to watch, but they stretch it too far.
Yeah. So we're talking about Columbus, we're talking about the conquistadors. Now we're at Florida getting settled and the first Europeans living in America. This is like 100, 200 years before the English get here, you know, anything like that. The Spanish were in Florida since 1513, 1565. Wow. They had a city, you know, a full-blown city. There's been Christians and Jews in America since 1565, permanently living there. So they did the same thing when they settled St. Augustine as Columbus when he got off the ship in the Bahamas. They waited for the holiday.
Really?
And got off.
Jesus, that's so
it's a tradition to pick a what's the word, a you know, auspicious day. Yeah, a Jewish holiday would be an auspicious day for them.
That's so interesting.
And it was a way for them to permanently stake like a Jewish claim on North America. You know, like, oh well, we founded this city on Sukkoth, you know, or Rosh Hashanah, not Christmas. So
now it's the right to suck us dry and still up our resources and money. That's a separate topic, though.
Maybe.
So kind of.
So that's Florida getting settled, and now we're at like 15 or so. Now, once Florida's settled and the Spanish are there, remember, the Spanish are in Mexico, the Spanish are in Peru. They're getting all this gold. They're shipping all this gold.
They're fighting the Aztecs and Incas.
Yeah. Florida was their like highway, like shipping lane back. You know, there's a thing called the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is essentially like the Silk Road of the Atlantic. It's this nice warm water current that can take you across from Africa to Florida to Ireland. You know, it's like a nice that essentially was the transatlantic slave trade, was essentially the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream has been there a long time. And that it runs along the east coast of Florida. And that's what keeps the water so warm there. And then that warm water goes over to Ireland. Now, that is the route that they would take. And when the Spanish first got a hold of that, they were trying to keep it secret. Juan Ponce de Leon helped discover that when he discovered Florida. And they realized that they could ship things faster, safer. You know, there's better fish, there's better birds because everything's warmer when you're on this nice highway. So the Jews, of course, had full control over that eventually because, you know, there's the Indie companies, East and West Indies companies, Dutch trading company,
they were largest
all that
companies
stuff
in the world at the time, probably, right? They were just massive.
Yep, there's other companies like that. But before we get to them, from 1500 to 1600, what kicks off? Piracy. As soon as Columbus gets to America, half of his people are trying to mutiny, they're trying to steal stuff, they're trying to steal ships and go do stuff on their own. They're like, it's amazing here. The women are smoking, there's coconuts, there's, you know, fruit. It's like, we can just live here. You know, they were eating biscuits and like old pork and like dying and in the ships. They're like, why are we going to go back? You know, screw Columbus, screw this. So there was pirates right from the get-go. As soon as the major powers discovered America, the pirates were splitting off too. Now, they'll show you all these pirate movies, right? Pirates of the Caribbean, right? We've all seen that. Do they ever tell you that they were Jewish?
Nope.
Now, that might sound like an attack or a denigrating thing. It's not at all. We actually carry a book here called The Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, which was by Ed Kritzler. It's a fascinating book, really good book. It's not anti-Jewish at all. It's a proud, you know, telling of Jewish history. And he glorifies the piracy and all this, and they were headquartered in Jamaica and Cuba, Key West, Tampa, you know, the Buccaneers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you know. Pretty much all of those, especially the leadership, were Jews, because the Jews in those days, in the age of discovery, were the ones with the best astronomical instruments, the best navigational instruments, the best linguists. You know, they were port people. Mm-hmm. They were used to traveling and hanging on the edges of empires and speaking with multiple people and being middlemen and exchangers and all that.
Money
you know,
exchangers.
So they, in those days, they knew many languages. They were great navigators. That's how they got by. And in fact, we think of Portuguese, right? Portuguese, there's a people, right? Jiu-jitsu, right? I don't know if that's Portuguese, but the Portuguese went to Brazil and took over Brazil.
So so they speak Portuguese there. So, or jiu-jitsu is actually Japanese.
Yeah, you're right.
So that's actually a Japanese word, but.
Jiu-jitsu, though? You ever looked into that one? Okay.
Yeah, why is the Jew?
But I don't know. Just a joke.
I know this pirate thing, though, I've never heard.
It's
once you start looking, it's every single time. This is not the conversation I was expecting to have today. Is what's funny. This is completely fascinating to me. I not know the Jews were some of the main pirates.
They were pretty much all the pirates, and essentially, in that book, it explains how ancient Israelites, the Jews, created piracy. The Phoenicians were the first well-known pirates, or I guess you could say the sea peoples back in time, but the Phoenicians were people who would torment the Greeks, the Romans. They tormented the Jews in the Old Testament. They may have been the Canaanites and the Philistines, part of the same descendants from the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were a sea power, and they were some of the biggest and earliest pirates in recorded history. And essentially what they were was the Phoenicians weren't like one set of people. They were essentially offshoots of parts of Semitic culture that had colonized the coasts of the Mediterranean. And what do we see with Portugal? Would you believe me if I told you Portugal is like a fake nation? It's not an ancient people. That might piss a lot of people off. That is like Portuguese.
I don't care. Actually, I'm part Portuguese, but whatever. I claim America, so.
What's funny is that Sam Hyde and people like that will use Portuguese to joke when they're talking about Jews. They'll say, "Oh, the Portuguese."
You can say whatever you want about about almost any other race. You can say whatever you want.
The Portuguese, run the world and all that.
Those Portuguese with their schemes, pirates, and.
What's crazy though is that in this book, Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, Ed Kritzler, who's a Jewish Jamaican historian, proves and explains that Portuguese in 1500s, 1600s, 1700s was synonymous with being Jewish. The Portuguese were essentially a lot of conversos and Marranos who wouldn't play ball with Spain.
And I'm part Portuguese, damn.
Who got insulated up against the coast. And just think about their name. It's not a national identity. It's a port people. They are Portuguese.
So it's just the port.
It's like saying merchantese.
Yeah, it's such a small little country too.
Like what? Like Israel, like Phoenicia in the old. If you look at old maps of Phoenicia was this tiny little country, essentially where Israel and Lebanon are today.
But they had massive power because they had all the shipping. Yeah, for such a small country, they had so much power for a while.
Now, from those Phoenician descendants, they spread out through the Islamic world too. We get people like Redbeard. Did you know Redbeard, the pirate, his pirate flag was a lime green Star of David? I'm not even kidding. Go look it up on Wikipedia.
I'm going to look this up, I'm going to have to make a clip and put that in there. That's
yeah, look it up. Slap it on there. It's true. He had a red beard.
Heard any of this pirate stuff.
Yeah, and slap the book up on there too if you get a picture, or get a copy yourself. It's really good, and it's...
What's it called? Just the book?
Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, that sounds... And it's written by a Jewish guy, so it's not like, cause a lot of times the best thing, that a lot of Jewish people will say this stuff in their own words and what they think. There's all kinds of the best stuff you can get straight from the Jewish. Same with the Jewish media today. You can get them being honest.
Now, some of this other stuff's going to blow your mind too, because this gets us right up, these kind of links, these threads carry on all the way through to today, to ruling families in America today. And so you've got the Jewish pirates going on. Jewish piracy and Columbus taking slaves in the Bahamas almost as soon as he gets there, that's the beginning of the slave trade. So there's a myth out there that, a lot of people are saying, the Jews control the slave trade. I'm not the first person to make that claim. That's been a long,
people have been saying that
standing thing. But recently there's been a gaslighting attempt to gaslight everyone and say, no, you're overemphasizing that. No, they had very, very little. No, proportionately, and they really try and get everyone lost in the weeds. And no, if you actually look at Charleston and New Orleans and the percentages, and no. Let's zoom out and look at the key figures and correct the misconceptions. Okay, the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean essentially became the slave trade. As empires would shift, Florida would be Spanish one year, then English the next, right? They would switch, and the pirates would shift allegiances. So one nation's pirates would be another nation's mercenary. And, they would be legal. They would just, if you were against them, you'd call them a pirate. So when the nations change, and Florida's switching hands, and all these Caribbean nations are changing hands, a lot of these pirates end up getting legitimate positions in governments and things like that. And they'll just kind of retire from piracy.
Yeah,
and
from a pirate to now, you're a government official now.
And they'll just
screwing us over even worse once you're in the government.
They'll just be remembered as like a naval hero, or like an admiral or a captain, or something like that, or just a pirate. But a lot of these families wanted to become legit, kind of like the mafia. You want to get out of the olive oil business
like
and
the
into
Meyer
something.
Lansky's, the Jewish mafia, they kind of went into the government. Hey guys, I'm demonetized everywhere. So if you want to support me and the podcast, go to fightbackpodcast.com and you can buy some cool merch like the shirt I'm wearing now.
So let's throw out some names. Have you ever heard of a family by the name of Monsanto?
Yes.
What do you think of Monsanto? You think of chemicals, right?
Yeah, the nasty, shitty chemicals.
Would you believe me if I told you they were one of those Caribbean Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean family, and that they got started in the big slave trade in New Orleans?
Wow, they were slave traders first, huh?
The Monsanto family, way before they got into chemicals, was a slave trading family, one of the most prominent.
Before they poisoned us with chemicals.
This is a fact, and they don't talk about it. And you have all these people screaming about Monsanto on TikTok and stuff, and no one talks about this. We got to look back into the history, because these are long goals. These people are running on long
they look like
ambitions.
Multiple generations down, and that's why they've been successful. I don't think it's smarter.
Yeah.
They're looking generation after generation. And it's more particular families, at least in my opinion. I don't think it's all Jews working together, but there's these family networks that are.
And, hey, I think I have Jewish friends. I have Jewish friends who are behind a lot of this message, because they're good, honest people who are against animal sacrifice. Mm-hmm. They're against blood sacrifice of all types. Here's my olive branch to the Jewish people. I love Jewish humor. I love a lot of Jewish music and Jewish history.
They're good at making money.
And I got a lot of good friends. I grew up in South Florida. Tons of friends are Jewish, and some of them are really nice and take firm stances against Israel and stuff like that. And they don't support blood sacrifice. Yeah. I think we as Christians and everyone need to make that distinction.
Yeah, because I want Jews on our side. I'm not trying to say they're our enemy, but if you're supporting Israel over America, then you are my enemy. If you're supporting this stuff, you are. But I want to, I want to reach out, like you said, reach out, olive branch out, and come to our side. We're not against the Jewish people, but if you want sacrifices to kill children, then yes, I'm against you, and I'm against the Christian Zionists that support that just as bad. Yeah. So people, I get labeled an anti-Semite all the time and Jew hater, which I'm not at all. I actually have one Jewish friend. Well, I have a couple of Jewish friends. I used to have two really good Jewish friends. One stabbed me in the back. Every Jewish stereotype you could think of just, I'm not going to get into it, just the most weaselly shit ever. A friend of 20 years. I was just like, wow. But I still have one good Jewish friend who's been one of the most loyal people I know. Extremely loyal. And people call me anti-Semite, tells them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
So.
Totally.
Anyway, sorry, off track. Where were we? We were Monsanto.
Monsanto family. So Monsanto were slave-owning Jews in New Orleans, very prominent slave traders. They like to bury that history, but it's still on Wikipedia. You can go check that yourself. But then, like I said, things happen. New Orleans changes hands a couple times, and the Spanish would come to power, then the English would come to power, and the Jews would kind of get kicked out in between, stuff like that.
They've been kicked out quite a bit.
So they actually, so we can actually add, there's all the countries they've been kicked out of, and that's funny. We can actually start naming states they've been kicked out of too, because they were kicked out of Louisiana, and the Monsanto family went to Pensacola, Florida. So the Monsanto family was expelled. One of them might have even been tarred and feathered, okay? And they were expelled to Florida. They set up shop in Pensacola. They're there for a decent amount of time. And, the Civil War goes on, stuff like that. Fast forward, slavery is no longer an option. What do? When your farming equipment is you don't own your farming equipment anymore, you get into chemicals.
Some poisonous, toxic chemicals to kill us.
You just kind of scooch over into another part of the assembly line, or the next ingredient or the next component of the farm that you can fulfill, and they chose chemicals. Wow. And I don't know if that kind of fills those ancient goals, or the goals that, how would you say this, whatever drove them into the slavery industry seems to be the same evil force that drove them into the chemical industry.
Yeah,
the
I don't think it's
GMO'd seed.
I don't think they're trying to help us with this GMO seeds. And
exactly.
Toxics. Just real quick, you mentioned the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant tried expelling the Jews. Were they doing cotton speculation or something, working against his army? They actually expelled the Jews for a couple of days, but Lincoln overturned the order. I mean, I don't know all the details behind it, but this is something that's verifiable that happened too.
It did happen. It was like Virginia or Tennessee or something up there. You're right. It was during the war. They were in the North and the South. But let's kind of talk about that a little bit. The next major player in this, and we can name literally 100 Caribbean families who were originally Spanish Jews who got kicked out. They went to the Caribbean, got rich, got into slave trading. Then they set up shop in the Gulf of Mexico and the South and the plantations. That was what they wanted to legitimize themselves with, was into kind of slavery in America, right? Instead of
such an honorable business.
This is true. It's all true history.
Well, a lot of times the slave trading, they were closed often in the Jewish holidays, the slave auctions. I know it was a black guy, I can't remember his name. He went through and did all the boats. Most of them, were, I don't know the percentages, but I know a high percentage of them were owned by Jews. Yeah,
and that's true, and that's one of the things they'll try and gaslight us on, and it's not fair. It's really not. It's not nice. It's only something you do if you're ashamed of this or want to cover it up or something. And that's another big thing about Columbus being Jewish, is it's put a lot of liberals in a big pickle, or a lot of Jews who kind of spoke out against him, kind of on liberal talking points, like Columbus brought mass murder and enslavement and death. And I don't go that far, but that's kind of the big talking point on the left, and the softies, the snowflakes say that a lot. A lot of them are Jewish, and then a year ago, it comes out that he was Jewish, and they're like, I'm going to stay silent on that for a little bit,
Well, something real quick that pisses me off a little bit. It's not like they just deny it. They went and fully blame the white people. Movies like Roots, written, I think produced by Jewish people to make us look evil.
Yeah.
They put this resentment of black and white people against each other over something. And of course, white people were involved with it and did some things wrong. But if we weren't the primary people doing it, and you have Jewish people making movie after movie, you have Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, was writing a textbook for this is true. You can look that up. He was writing the textbook for our kids' schools. It's just, you look who's pushing it.
Dude, we're gonna connect this so deep to exactly what you just said. It's gonna blow your mind. I could name 100 Caribbean families who reinvented themselves as Southern Americans. This is the crazy part. People think the Civil War, we're talking about the lead up to the Civil War here, is the plantation culture in the South. You wouldn't believe how many Caribbean Jewish families reinvented themselves as Southern Americans in 1700s, leading up to 1800s, leading up to the Civil War. And I could name 100 of them. It's going to take way too long. I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but let's talk about some really prominent ones, especially the ones that relate to Florida. And going back to your first question about Columbus, or kind of why are there so many Jewish people in Florida, here's one of your big first answers. The Columbus stuff is just kind of like a broad strokes, the context, The landscape at the time was people were looking for Eden in America. That idea was being passed around. This messianic prophecy was being passed around. Well, then they settle Florida, the Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean and all that stuff. Monsanto is one of the big names that comes out. Who's another big name that comes out? Let's focus on two of them. The Levy Yulee family. Levy. Now, Moses Levy. Remember we were talking about, who owned all those slave ships? Mm-hmm. Moses Levy owned a lot of them. In fact, we don't know if there was like 10 Moses Levies because it was such a common name and so many of the slave ships were owned by a Moses Levy.
Wow.
That's indisputable. So we just don't know which Moses Levy, okay? We know this one was involved because he wrote about slavery, but there might have been a whole bunch of Moses Levies. So Moses Levy was born, his name's Moses Eli Levy, or Bin Yulee, or Ibn Yulee. He's got a lot of long name. And he was essentially a Moroccan Jew. So remember when Spain kicked out all those Jews? Yeah. A lot of them went to Morocco and did what they were doing in Spain. They became court financiers, and they would lend money to the rulers and stuff like that, and they'd finance business ventures, and they'd be the banksters essentially for some of the sultans and those people. So a lot of them went to Morocco because the Muslims were being nice to them as long as they'd kind of help them out. But this one family, as you kind of can imagine, the Muslims get sick of the Jews being in Morocco really soon after them coming from Spain, so they kick them out, and then we have another wave of Moroccan Jews coming to the Caribbean.
Starting to see a pattern here.
Now, dude, nobody on YouTube is talking about this.
You have so many things I haven't heard today.
Epstein Island, Moses Levy, guess where he relocates to?
No.
St. Thomas, Charlotte Amalie. It's the father island that Epstein Island is a tiny little freckle on.
So they're basically like
it's the same island. Yeah, there is no Epstein Island. Epstein Island is like a little
connected
resort island it's almost attached.
That's insane.
And dude,
this is the top slave trader, the top ship, or the top ship owner.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it's going to blow your mind. So Moses Levy, he gets kicked out of Morocco. He comes to the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, Charlotte Amalie, which is the island that Epstein Island is connected to. Epstein Island is tiny. You can't fly into Epstein Island unless you got like a helicopter. But there's a regular old airport on this bigger island. So there's Little St. James, there's Greater St. James, and then the island that they're attached to is Charlotte Amalie, which I think is part of St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. So Moses Levy goes there. He's kind of a young guy. I think he's in like his 30s. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He already has a foot in the door for the slave trade, so he's doing that. He comes to the Caribbean. He dominates the slave trade. He does sugar and lumber too. This isn't like a big thing, but sugar was a big problem back then because a lot of people were addicted to it, and they were addicted to rum. And the rum, I believe, I'm not an alcohol expert, but you need sugar to make it, and that was a crippling industry, kind of like fentanyl of today. That was like the fentanyl.
The Sackler family.
Yeah, exactly. That was like the fentanyl.
The opium wars. You start seeing patterns. You look at all these things.
Yeah, that was like the fentanyl of its day, and they got everyone hooked on rum. The pirates and the rum. The pirates would drop the rum off at different cities and take advantage of the people when they were drunk.
They destroyed native cultures with alcohol because they don't really tolerate it very well.
Totally.
I don't think they have the same enzymes, so they don't handle alcohol well. But this massive, I grew up by some of the Native American reservations, and it's just sad.
So, dude, this St. Thomas connection, it goes so deep, and literally, like, this is the first podcast that's going to break this. Nobody knows who this is. This
is all brand new to me. I'm like blown away with so many things today.
Moses Levy goes to St. Thomas and starts his family. I think he had like a son who was already born or whatever. And he's in the Caribbean. He's getting rich. He's a big, big slave trader. Well, one day, Jake, this guy has an epiphany. I don't know if it's in his sleep or a sickness or what, but similar to Columbus, he has almost like an epileptic episode, a vision where he believes God is talking to him and tells him, Moses Levy, you need to start a Jewish utopia in America. Not anywhere, in Florida. Utopia. They called it New Jerusalem. This is a direct continuation of Columbus's life mission. And it ties directly into Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, the public school system. Why in Florida? Why did they hang out in the Caribbean and Florida? Why was that so important for them? Well, Moses Levy has a son named David. Keep that in mind. He has this epiphany, this experience, and he's a new man. And you'd think the new man would kind of be done with slavery, right? He's like, whoa, I just talked to God. No, the slavery keeps going on. He's still a slaver, but now he has this new mission, and he moves to Florida. And about 1818 was the first time he visited Florida, around there. There's news that Florida is going to become an American territory. And Moses Levy's living in the Caribbean, next to Epstein Island, literally on Epstein Island. I would bet $1 million he put feet on Epstein Island.
Yeah.
Dude,
It's just so
like,
wild.
He could see it every morning when he had his tea or whatever he did every day. He could see Epstein Island.
Do you know what they're doing with this island today? Sorry to get you off subject, but is this island still run by these people, or you have no idea?
I don't know much. St. Thomas, it's mostly just tourism. Someone, I think, with the last name Eckhoff has Epstein Island. Nana?
Who would want to buy that? I think they still, could be wrong, but I think they had like armed security for a while after he was dead there, and like,
have you ever connected with Luke Rudkowski from
a little bit.
We Are Change? He's one of the first people, maybe the only one of the first to go get into Epstein Island and film everything like that. But okay, so Moses Levy, he catches word, hears rumors that Florida is about to be purchased by America. This is 1821. He takes his son, and he hears about this deal. Anyone located in Florida at the hour of the purchase, at the hour of the signing of Florida becoming American, will get automatic American citizenship, permanent American citizenship. So he takes his son. Some people say it was 2 weeks. Some people say he didn't even make it in time. Some people say he just had his servant go and, but he makes it there barely in the nick of time into America, buys property in Florida, and settles in Florida. And when it strikes midnight or whatever, whenever they sign the deal, he's an American citizen. A total new identity. Total new identity. He changes his name a little bit. His son changes his name a little bit. And now they are the Levy family. Levy. David Levy, Moses Levy. That's how we know them today. But they had different names before that. Almost more Arabic sounding names.
How the name changing so bizarre to me. And they still do it today, like Benjamin Netanyahu, all these guys.
So Moses Levy's in Florida, and remember I told you, God told this man, this very wealthy Jewish slave owner, to start a Jewish utopia in Florida. He buys 100,000 acres. That's a fuck ton of land back then, especially. They didn't even have that much land, like, how would you say, surveyed. It wasn't even surveyed yet. He just bought as much as he could, as much as they'd let him.
Find, yeah.
Yeah, and about 100,000 acres. He moves to Florida and he starts his Jutopia. It's called New Jerusalem. He's using the same language, the same terminology that Columbus used 300 years or so
before. What year was this? Do you know or no?
This is 1820. 1821, Florida becomes an American territory, and they moved there just at the last second to get American citizenship, and then they just stayed. And they moved the slavery operation to Florida. He started a town called Micanopy, Florida. It was the first inland city in America that like wasn't on a river or a port, essentially. They had a big trading post. He named it after a Native American chief, and he spent much of his time talking to Native Americans about their history, their potential Hebrew Israelite lineage. He was obsessed with this stuff.
I saw one of your videos. I was supposed to interview a couple months ago. Some of the old history had connections of things that looked very similar to Jewish, correct? I was trying to watch some of your videos really quick. You're supposed to have an interview a couple months ago, but it got pushed back. But they were showing things like their hats, the circumcision. There's some of the words they use.
Yeah, we'll get to those Indians. We can talk about them because the Indians in America who have the most evidence for being like a lost tribe of Israel or hidden Jewish descent, they're the Seminole Indians, who are the main Indians in Florida. They're the Indians who started the whole casino thing. Literally, they are the best businessmen in America. I'm not even kidding. And
and always vices, porn, slavery, gambling.
Tobacco. They have their tobacco tax.
Fentanyl, or I guess Oxycontin it was.
Well, I love Seminole Indians, so I'm not trying to associate them with anything, but they have like this undeniable Hebrew influence right down to like the money-making capabilities. And guess where the Seminole Indian tribe is headquartered in Florida?
New Jerusalem? Or
Close.
Utopia?
Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
Headquartered in Hollywood. That's pretty compelling. But we'll talk about them later.
In Hollywood, we're not going to get to this podcast. Isn't that where there was hundreds of Israeli spies that were there before 9/11? The 9/11 hijackers were there. There was this giant.
Oh yeah.
We'll get to this podcast. But there's a giant Israeli spy network there right before 9/11.
Dude, we got to talk about that sometime too.
Yeah, that's like a separate podcast. I think we have so much stuff we're covering now. It's like this is also fascinating. This is like so much new stuff I've not heard.
Moses Levy is in Florida, and he's got a young son. His son's name is David. Moses is doing the whole Utopia thing. Now, he's recruiting hundreds of people, rich Jews from around the world, to come stay and live on this farm. And they have black slaves pretty much doing all the stuff for them. And he's there with his son. Guess who is one of their top financiers for this mission? He's pretty rich on his own, but guess who's helping them out with the money? It might be a hard guess. Who?
Warburg?
You're right.
Did I get it? Oh,
yes,
wow.
You're right.
Okay.
Dude.
Oh, shit.
Dude, very good. So the
I've been
Warburgs.
trying to follow the finance stuff.
You're on it.
Wild once you start going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Sorry for quizzing. That can be annoying, but you nailed it on the head.
Rothschild's the one that everyone says, but it's
exactly.
Like, look at the Warburgs.
Exactly.
Don't hear about them very much.
The Rothschilds married into the Warburg family, and when the Rothschilds would do business in America, they really liked to present the Warburg side of the family because they didn't want to spook everyone out with, the Rothschilds in America, dominating. So they have the Warburgs do it.
Which most people never even heard of, probably.
Exactly.
That name flies right under the radar, but that's one of the most important names in American history, or it should be. But anyways, I'll let you go on.
Exactly. So Moses Levy has his New Jerusalem, Jewish Utopia, that he wants all the Jews in the world. I'm not even kidding, Jake. He's writing out around the world. Pens. He's penning letters and all this stuff. Saying, the Jews from around the world, come here and live in Florida and be treated like kings, life is perfect here. This is the Garden of Eden.
We have slaves.
Yeah, that was a big kind of thing that would compel people to come too. But all these rich Jews from around the world were coming to Florida in the 1800s to live on this Jewish utopia. And it was called New Jerusalem. But okay, so the Warburgs were giving him money to do this, and they were recruiting in Europe for him. So he would recruit, kind of around the Caribbean and stuff. They were in Europe recruiting for him and financing and gaining, raising capital to kind of fund this whole enterprise. And there are families in America, Jewish families in Florida and America today, who came to America as part of this project to make Florida a Jewish utopia. And if you zoom out, they were largely successful. I mean, it's undeniable they were successful in that endeavor. Now, Moses, there's so much we can say about Moses, okay? He was one of the most prominent slave traders. He was also the leading anti-slavery writer in his day. I'm not even kidding.
It just doesn't make sense.
It's that his own biographers, his own Jewish biographers will tell you that proudly, that he was conflicted.
It doesn't sound very conflicted. It sounds like some bullshit narrative he's pushing.
It sounds like the Battle
of Waterloo. If I was conflicted, I wouldn't own thousands of slaves and traffic them across the world if I was conflicted.
It sounds like the Battle of Waterloo, the Rothschild tactic, but betting on both sides, right? The winner can always get what the loser owed you and pay you back double, and stuff like that.
Oh, look at World War I. The Warburgs, weren't they funding both sides of the Germany and America? Or they charged both of the banks, the federal banks? And
the Warburgs did the whole Jekyll Island thing, which was right on the border between Florida and Georgia. It wasn't even technically part of America until 1947.
Oh, wow.
Right around there. 1946, 48, I think it was 1947.
Yeah, and that's Jekyll Island. That's where they had secret meetings to create the Federal Reserve. They spent years, paying off, bribing politicians. They say, oh, they don't make money. It's off it. It's like, yeah, I'm sure the Warburg spent, decades, or a decade private, doing all these secret meetings to get it funded to take control of the U.S.'s money supply. Now they can just print money out of thin air and charge us interest.
Yeah, that's a fact. And it's also when the big push to get women in the workforce started and taxing everything. And
1913, ADL was also formed.
Yes. Yeah, good point. And, dude, I love to talk about this. Jekyll Island or Shekel Island? With all the money and all the finance coming out of there, could there be something to that double meaning, Shekel Island.
Yeah,
here's another one.
Go ahead.
Here's another one you're going to like. It kind of ties into a lot of my theories. Why do they like Florida so much? Why do they think Florida's the Garden of Eden? Well, we can go, it's going to take another episode to talk about all the Garden of Eden evidence, but one of the main things is the latitude. Where the two fake rivers in Iraq that they say are the Garden of Eden, the Tigris and Euphrates, where those two rivers split in Iraq, you can drop a pin right where they fork, and it's 31.0 latitude. The Florida Panhandle is 31.0 latitude. Jekyll Island is 31.0 latitude. Jerusalem is 31.0 latitude. This latitude is literally...
So it's all across the exact point.
Yes, and it means a heck of a lot to these people. Jekyll Island, the Florida... the same people who determined the Florida state line were the same Freemasons who designed Washington, D.C., with all the astronomy and all this. So they knew this stuff. They knew this was on the same latitude as Jerusalem.
It seems very important, these design. Was it like the Egyptian pyramids and everything?
Yeah.
Latitude seemed very important all throughout history.
It's ley lines, stuff like that. But okay, so we got Moses Levy living in Florida. He's having the Warburgs finance his Florida project, the Utopia. Well, let's talk about his son now. Like I said, Moses Levy could be his whole own thing. One more thing about him. I almost missed this. I'm going to quote Dr. Henry Green, a Jewish historian at University of Miami. If he, Moses Levy, would have held on to his real estate, he would have owned Disney World today. Disney World was on his land before the Civil War.
Wow.
He owned what was Disney World today in Orlando. So if there's any caves or tunnels or anything under Orlando, under Disney World, he would have known about them too. He would have been the first to be there. Okay, that blew my mind because when you look at Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, they actually had a big connection, or a small connection, to Disney. This
Really?
weird connection. And we're going to tie it back into that island in the Caribbean, too. Moses Levy, if he held on to his real estate, if it didn't change hands, his family would own Disney World today. That's according to Dr. Henry Green. What else? He was the grandfather. This is the crazy one, dude. He was the grandfather of the American public school system. Moses Levy. There's a name that people throw out. Who invented public school? There's this guy named like Ham or Hass that they always say.
They try to credit for.
Horace Mann was his name. Horace Mann. They say this guy invented public school. Moses Levy was writing about public school before this guy graduated high school. Moses Levy, remember I said he was the
He
leading...
was the money behind it, probably, put the other guys to the face.
Yeah, Moses Levy was the #1 anti-slavery writer in the world, while he's also one of the biggest slave holders in America. And not even kidding, he would write all this anti-slavery stuff, and it would be huge in Europe, extremely popular. But in America, he would be a full different character.
So he wanted to end it out there and stuff, and so he'd be the only place owning slaves. They could get it a lot cheaper and less competition and stuff, potentially.
Yeah.
Or trying to make himself look like a good person, or who knows what his motives were.
I think he just wanted to be remembered on the right side of history. And I think he knew that everyone would kind of be like, everyone owned slaves back then. But he was the only one writing stuff against it.
Yeah,
so he was one of the good ones, you know.
But he just didn't care, so he knew he was doing evil stuff.
Exactly. I think it's worse if you have the conscience.
Oh, for sure it's worse if you're
the double,
dumb or whatever. But for sure it's worse if you know what you're doing is evil and you're still doing it.
Yeah.
It's like eating meat. I think a lot of people just don't really think about it. But if you think about it and you still do it, and you know it's evil. It's a little bit worse.
Yeah. It's the rabbi diet. That's the big pill a lot of Christians don't want to swallow. It's
exactly
the bloodlessness. They can all argue about, Jesus ate a little fish. I don't think he did. If you really dig into it, there's a good case that he never.
Cam did a phenomenal job. Cam Waters, right?
But even if you want to debate all that, and you can get lost in the weeds, the goal of Christianity is wolf laying with the lamb in the same room, lion eating straw. That is a return back to the Garden of Eden, meaning no flesh, a bloodless diet. Whereas the rabbinical tradition is based on endless animal sacrifice. You can't have the Christian vision of the future with that vision of the future. They're incompatible, and that's what the world's starting to understand today. But let's talk about Moses Levy. Remember I said there was this big religious inspiration for him to settle Florida. Well, and he's big on public schools. He's one of the biggest influential people talking about public school. Would you believe me if I told you he took the slavery model and invented public schooling? He goes, all right.
I would definitely.
He's like,
schools felt to me.
He's like, you're going to wake him up real early. He's like, you're going to get him on the bus or the tractor, or whatever. You're going to ship them in together. You're going to give them a uniform. You're going to give them a little food halfway through the day. It's literally like diet slavery.
You have to listen to what the teachers say. They don't really teach you to think for yourself. No critical thinking. It's just, this is the answer. This is what it is. They don't teach you how to think at schools. They tell you what the answers are to things.
Yeah, and you get whipped. You get hit with a ruler. It was like diet slavery.
Yeah, because back then they were hitting the kids and stuff. It was common to smack the kids and stuff. They mouthed off, and so they don't do that anymore. But the schools are still terrible.
This Horace Mann guy gets all the credit for starting public school in America, but Moses Levy was way before him, and actually implementing this before Horace Mann got to. So his son. Now let's talk about his son. And again, it's hard to not just focus on this Moses Levy guy all night because it's crazy.
They seem like great people. We're definitely going to have to do another podcast because there's so much more I want to cover today, and there's so many offshoots we can get to.
Moses Levy, he essentially, whatever, let's put him to the side. He had a kid named David. David's growing up in Florida. He was I think he was born in the Virgin Islands. David Levy is very ambitious. When he's like 18, he becomes he very early on, I think he was like 18, he becomes a lawyer, and he's one of the most prominent lawyers in Florida. He's also one of the most prominent Freemasons in Florida. So, people don't always think about Judaism and Freemasonry, but in Florida that was certainly the case. Now, this is the guy that we call the founding father of Florida, not Moses Levy. Moses Levy's son. Remember all that crazy stuff we're saying about Moses Levy? Well, let's find out who his son was. Moses Levy's son, David Levy, was America's first Jewish senator. He was Florida's first senator. He's the man who took Florida from a territory in 1820 to a state in 1845. He wrote the Florida Constitution. He chose the dates that Florida would be, officially admitted to the Union. And guess what dates he chose? This shit's crazy.
Jewish holiday?
Well, close. March 3rd. 3-3.
3-3. The 30. I don't want to get too off topic, but there's 33 I don't quite get, but it's clearly very, very important to them.
Yeah, there's a lot you could say about it, whether it's mocking Jesus, whether it's, Masons glorifying.
Was he 33 when he died?
Yeah, that's what they say. Alexander the Great was allegedly 32-ish, 33, might have been 33 too.
Yeah, because 33 number is clearly very, very important in everywhere in use, and I don't quite understand the numerology stuff, but I need to dig down that rabbit hole.
There's 33 vertebrae in your back. There's 33 gods in the Hindu pantheon, like major gods, all this stuff. But he chooses 3-3 for the birthday. And essentially, Florida becomes like a Freemasonic headquarters of the southern United States. Not many people know that, because when the Civil War ends, Confederate Freemasonry kind of gets buried, and it gets turned back into American Freemasonry. But Moses Levy's son, David Levy, he's a lawyer. He's also into the public school thing. He actually gets Florida its first public school, Moses' son, David Levy. So he's doing all this stuff. He becomes a politician. He's still a young guy. He becomes America's first Jewish senator, the first one. He becomes Florida's, in the same move, he's also Florida's first senator. So he's the senator for Florida, and he's the first Jewish senator. Now let's introduce you to his cousin. We're going to go back to Epstein Island, okay? Who else was living next to Epstein Island with Moses Levy and David? Judah P. Benjamin. Judah P. Benjamin. It's insane that people don't know these people. Especially,
sounds familiar, but I can't think who that is.
He was the second in command in the Confederacy.
Oh, wow.
Jefferson Davis was the president of the South in the Civil War. And remember, they tell us this whole war was over slavery. Well, who's there in the rooms saying, no, we're going to fight tooth and nail to the end over this? It's not your everyday Christian, South Carolinian who's just trying to get by, who loves
most
his...
of them didn't own slaves. It was only the very rich elite that even benefited from slavery. It was the plantation owners.
Exactly. And even if you did have a couple, you weren't the one who brought them here by the thousands, okay? That was certain families, But okay. So going back to the Virgin Islands, you've got the David Levy family, Moses Levy and his son David. They're from the Virgin Islands, right next to Epstein Island. Literally as close as you can get to Epstein Island. And on that same island, his cousin is born. His uncle, is cousins with his dad. And so they both have kids, Moses Levy, and I think this guy's name was Philip Benjamin, I don't remember. But his son's name is Judah Benjamin. Judah Benjamin looks like Seth Rogen and what's the other one? Seth Rogen and Jonah Hill mixed together. He literally looks like that. Could not look more like that. He's stuck with a smirk on his face. People would challenge him to fights because he had this smirk
He's one of those guys you just want to
Stuck on
punch.
his
Look
face.
where you just want to punch him in his face.
No, dude, it was a big problem in his life. I mean, go look at his pictures.
I'm gonna look him up after this.
He'd be screwing people over left and right and just be like smirking the whole
As
time.
he's just fucking him over.
And this guy, Judah P. Benjamin, also big in the slave trade, also part of this family. You know, he has a different last name, but he's part of the same family. Instead of Florida, their family goes back to New Orleans. So Jews are allowed in New Orleans now in the 1800s. And he's there, and he's gaining control and influence. He's one of the most prominent families, rulers in New Orleans. And essentially, he becomes the second Jewish senator in America.
Oh my God.
So what are the odds that these two guys who came from Epstein Island become the first two Jewish senators in American history, Judah Benjamin and David Yulee, and then when the Civil War kicks off, they are number 2 and number 3 in command.
Well, and they started the public school.
And they started public school system. Now,
For sure, for the benefit of the American people.
Judah Benjamin was not... Remember Moses Levy was playing both sides on the slavery thing? Mm-hmm. Judah Benjamin did the same thing. He was, in his day, he was the world's best-known anti-slavery advocate. He was writing papers and having them published in Europe just like his uncle, playing the same game and also having slaves at the same time. So he's there in New Orleans. David Yulee is in Florida. And now you have, Florida is a big state. New Orleans is a very influential state. You've got the Atlantic Ocean that Florida owns. You've got the Mississippi River that New Orleans owns. You're set. You're playing the Game of Thrones. Like, you own the South if you own those shipping lanes. And David Levy's presiding over Florida. Judah Benjamin's presiding over New Orleans. And this is the lead up to the Civil War. So who's going to look us in the face and say it was an issue between Christian North and Christian South over slavery when it was... And I'm not saying the North was perfect. And honestly, maybe I would have liked to see the South win. I don't know. History's not so simple as black or white. But essentially, you had the Jewish slave owners in the South using the Old Testament to justify their slave industry. And you had Christians elsewhere saying, no, we don't play by that book. There's no room for slavery in the New World and, where America's going. And the South, not to oversimplify it, states' rights were definitely a factor. Are you there?
Yeah, it cut out for a second, but I think it's, for some reason it froze up for a second, but it should have still recorded on your end, so I think it's fine.
All right, we're good.
Every now and again it does that, but of course, yeah, so we're saying state rights.
Yeah, so blah, blah, blah. We got David Yulee and Judah Benjamin are high up in the... Not only are they in the Senate, they are both in the cabinet of Jefferson Davis. How people don't know this. I'm
people
don't know.
I'm shocked I don't know this. I feel
how
like
people don't know
this.
that the number 2 and number 3 in command of the Confederacy were Jews. Slave owning.
Because the public schools that they created don't teach us that.
Precisely, and that's unfortunately that's the truth. And so what happens? Okay, David Yulee, he didn't care too much. He wasn't as fanatical as his dad. He just liked, Freemasonry and law, and he liked the power. And Judah Benjamin, however, was very ideological. He loved writing and, playing both sides and, rallying people up with, he back in those days, you'd see a theater, you'd hear a band here and there, you'd get a new book fresh off the press. Sometimes those could blow people's minds, just totally change the way you think. You haven't even heard ideas like this. Books were so influential back then. Pamphlets were so influential. These guys were so influential because they were printing so much propaganda, essentially, and sending it across the South and to Europe. So they had all this control in the South. And Judah Benjamin is egging on the Civil War. David Yulee was kind of like, we should maybe, not, let's just kind of stay here and focus on the South. Judah Benjamin was saying, Jefferson Davis, they're going to remember you as a pussy if you don't stand up for the South. And, let's fight. So he was egging on the king, or not the king, the president of the South to fight. And when the Civil War did start, of course, all the government in the South kind of gets shifted around. These people actually keep their titles, and they're now in Jefferson Davis's cabinet and his war cabinet. They're like generals. They're making like some of the biggest decisions in the war. And okay, so right there you have, not is it just a slaveholding or slave trade issue. Literally, the Confederacy was ran by Jews who had relocated from the Caribbean not too long before. That's a totally different picture. Like you're saying with the pictures, it's always Matthew McConaughey and a Southern guy, and this is our land, boy, and I don't know why we're fighting, but we're going to fight. And it was way more complex than that. It was a mission that almost kind of started with this whole Eden in Florida, New Jerusalem, Utopia mission. But okay, Civil War kicks off, and then let's talk about something else that's pretty cool. But also remember, you were saying Ghislaine Maxwell's dad,
Robert Maxwell, yeah, right.
He was big on the textbooks.
Mossad agent.
Those textbooks would then be used in the public schools that the Levy family helped also start. Is it not insane that you can trace the McGraw-Hill textbook back to Epstein Island through Ghislaine Maxwell, and then you can also trace the public schools back to Epstein Island through the Benjamin?
Yeah, so the guys that created the public school system lived on the same island, and they came through. Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, printed the textbooks, and then obviously, her and Epstein running these giant blackmail operations on our presidents, and not just presidents. They were going after a lot of the financiers, the tech people. It sounds like a big worldwide Jewish conspiracy to me.
Now, there's a lot more we could talk about, for example, the KGC. We mentioned Freemasonry a little bit. We're now at the Civil War, and you've got all these Freemasons in the South who are now having to split off from the North. And what happens with Freemasonry in the South is it essentially rebrands itself as the Knights of the Golden Circle. The Knights of the Golden Circle. Now, who was helping to fund the Knights of the Golden Circle? Judah P. Benjamin and David Levy Yulee, big supporters of the KGC. But remember, this was kind of secret. Now, the KGC, Knights of the Golden Circle, this is something every American should know, especially if we live in the South. That's what the Freemasons were during the Civil War. They weren't Freemasons anymore. They became the Knights of the Golden Circle. Now, when the Civil War ends, the Knights of the Golden Circle become the KKK.
Wow.
I'm not even kidding.
And that was funded by these Jewish brother and cousin.
Now, what does... Exactly. Now, and people think the KKK is like a Christian organization. That's not true, okay? Grand Wizard, Grand Dragon, this is pagan stuff, okay? And you could even argue that the church or the cross being burned is extremely anti-Christian.
Like a pagan symbol or something.
Yeah, so, there's a lot that you could say about the KKK, but do you know what KKK means? Ku Klux Klan? It's like a mix of Greek and German. It's a Greek word that means kuklos, which means circle. They are the Knights of the Circle clan, a direct continuation of the Knights of the Golden Circle from the South. Knights of the Golden Circle. What did the Knights of the Golden Circle want? The KGC. They wanted to take over all of the Gulf of Mexico and create a golden circle. Their vision was to avoid war with the North and to simply go south. They wanted to keep the North. All right, you guys do you with no slavery, but leave us alone.
Take the land down below.
Exactly. And they started, and guess what? In Wikipedia, it'll tell you that they didn't succeed. Dude, they succeeded. To this day, Cuba has an extremely large crypto Jew population, and they use the KGC flag to this day. They use a KGC flag. Many Central American countries use a KGC flag. You know the word. You know the word filibuster.
Yeah.
How like they go and they waste time, in the House of Representatives
to make it so they can't vote, right?
Now, what that word originally meant was it was a KGC term, where you would get a bunch of guys in America, you'd get a bunch of guns, a boat, horses, whatever, and you'd go take over a country in Central America or the Caribbean or some easy little island, or Nicaragua, was easy to take over back then, and they would just take over places like that, Panama, and
Wow.
they would go down and do that right up before the Civil War because they were starting this plan. Now, when the Civil War kicks off, it ruined this plan, and they had to focus fighting the North.
Yeah.
But to this day, Jake, there are thousands and thousands of Confederate Americans who live in Brazil, in Mexico, in parts of Central America, because their ancestors succeeded in staying there
that land.
or escaping there after the Civil War.
Interesting. It's off subject, but it's really interesting. The president of Mexico is, not Christian, a Christian nation.
Right.
The Mexican nation, there's 40,000 Jews in the entire country, and Jewish president. That's a little bizarre too.
Yeah, it is. But
typically don't vote for people of different religions and different ethnicities than them. But
yeah,
I know a lot of people got killed in that election. I don't know how many, but I know a lot of them were murdered too.
Yeah, and, the whole KGC goal was to take over all of the Gulf of Mexico, all of the Caribbean, and as much as South America as they could, they were going to take. And you can go look up KGC maps and see all the plans they had. I mean, they marked the whole, essentially all of Mesoamerica, all of the tropics would be under their control.
Yeah,
and
I did a lot of research after this podcast. There's so many things I've never heard that you're saying.
Now, the KGC, they were the Freemasons of the South, but they were also like the SS, or like the Gestapo, or like the Secret Service and the spy network and all this. They were good with secrecy. Mm-hmm. Jake, when Abraham Lincoln got assassinated, every single one of the conspirators, whether you believe the story or not, whatever, but all of the people that they pinned it on, or that actually partook in the assassination plot, every single one was a known member of the Knights of the Golden Circle. It's not even hidden. Just no one knows what it is.
Yeah, no, because I've heard, that Lincoln was assassinated by Jews and whatnot, and Booth, and what's his name, Booth might have been Jewish, but whether it was or wasn't, it shows the organization was clearly tied in with them.
The KGC was the Confederate Freemasons, and they did assassination plots in the North all the time, and a lot of the Freemasons in the North would help them or sided with them, and but okay,
they have a long history of assassinating people, just as Israel does today.
Yeah, the KGC, they were also the part of the financial wing. They were like the bankers. They were like the Knights Templar of the South, of the Confederate Freemasons.
Seeing how it's all tied in.
And they were tasked. Remember when the North and the South declare war on each other, all the federal buildings in the South, in the southern United States, were seized by the South. And they took all the gold, they took all the, arms and all the, anything that's federal now gets split in half between the North and the South. All that federal gold was transferred to the Knights of the Golden Circle. And the KGC, just like the Templars or, the SS, they were, anything that was very special and secret would go through them. So the Civil War is raging, and we could, there's so much to say, but skip to the end of the Civil War. Jefferson Davis still has Judah Benjamin and David Yulee advising him. But we're at the end of the Civil War. It's not looking good, Jefferson Davis is in Virginia, and the Northern Army is also in Virginia. They're right on his tail. And Jefferson Davis says, I'm going to stay in Virginia till the last man. We're going to fight. We're going to win. Judah Benjamin goes, hey, it's not looking so good. Let's get out while we can. Let's grab all the money, and we'll go regroup in Florida, New Orleans, or maybe Texas. and we'll keep fighting. And that was their plan. So they're in Virginia, and Jefferson Davis gets on a train and escapes. What was the city in Virginia? Doesn't matter. The city where the Civil War kind of comes to a head. Jefferson Davis hightails it with Judah Benjamin and a lot of his cabinet. And allegedly, they have millions of dollars of gold on them. Millions. They had been dumping gold, hiding it, every chance they can get. They've got tons and tons and tons of gold that the South was using to fund the war. Judah Benjamin is right next to Jefferson Davis. He's like, hey man, me and you till the very end, right to the last man. If I got to take a bullet for you, I'm gonna, They're on this train and they make it down through the Carolinas. They get to like Georgia. The North is very close on their trail. I mean, they can like hear dogs barking, looking for them. They get off the train. They're now just running through the woods. They've got tons and tons of gold. They've got soldiers in the South helping them. They're stashing.
Gold's heavy.
Yeah, they're stashing gold. They're carting it. They got it on donkeys. It's a lot of people are stealing it, running off with it. But Judah Benjamin's got a force that's protecting him. Jefferson Davis has got his Secret Service that are protecting him. They've got a lot of gold. They're in Georgia. The North's on their trail. And then what happens? Judah Benjamin goes, listen, we need to split up. Jefferson Davis, you're gonna try and make it to Alabama or New Orleans or something. He says, I'm going to try and make it to Florida, or, we're going to regroup in Florida. I don't remember, but he said, we need to split up, and we're going to meet up somewhere, and then we're going to get them. We need to split up, and then we'll come back stronger than ever. When they split up, Judah Benjamin, he puts on a disguise. He sews as much gold into his clothes as he literally can fit. Luckily, he's one of the only fat people in the South in those days, so he can hide all this gold on his body. And he's walking around with a disguise and a fake French accent. And he's pretending like he has no idea. The Confederates? Jefferson Davis, never heard of the guy. He's got all this gold. He's got people who are helping him too. He somehow makes it, I think, to New Orleans first and then comes back to Florida. Jefferson Davis gets caught in Georgia. Judah Benjamin screwed him. And Jefferson Davis gets caught. And that's how the Civil War pretty much ends. They caught Jefferson Davis. Up until then, Jefferson Davis thought they were in good hands. He thought they were so far in Virginia, he thought he was going to get to come back to Florida and fight in Florida. Then maybe they'd go back to Texas and fight in Texas. He thought the war still had years to go.
They weren't giving him they weren't correctly telling him what was actually happening.
Exactly. Judah Benjamin was playing him like a violin and essentially got him to separate from all the money and said, oh, go over there. They're going to keep you safe. They take all the money.
Probably told him where they went, too.
Yeah.
The Goyim's that way.
They catch Jefferson Davis, and allegedly he was wearing girls' clothes, okay? Humiliated for the rest of his life. And,
wow. Probably the idea of this guy's probably, hey, put this on.
Yeah. It might have been a exaggeration. He might have just had like a woman's a hood over him. He looked like a woman. That's the report. They found him dressed like a woman. But so they catch Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis has like no money on him. He's got like $40 on him. And they're like, they got a gun in his face and they say, where is the fucking gold? Okay? The North knew how much gold they had. This is what we'd call the Confederate treasury. Jefferson Davis says, I have no clue what you're talking about. They don't know where to find it. Judah Benjamin, we don't know how much gold he has, but he knows where the gold is going. He makes it back to, of all places, the Yulee plantation. The David Levy Yulee, the guy, his cousin from before.
In Florida?
In Florida. If you can go look online right now, all the treasure hunters in the world are convinced that this treasure made it to Florida.
It's never been found.
Never been found. Some of it's been found. They find it all the time scattered across the South. They find KGC treasure hoards. The only thing is, this was the final one. This was like the big one that they were trying.
Like it was a lot of treasure.
They were trying to get out. Some say it's buried on the Yulee plantation, but what we know for sure is that Judah Benjamin. We know that the Confederate treasury, what was left of it officially, made it to the Yulee plantation. It was received by the Yulee family and then never heard from again. They either shipped it out, buried it, or reinvested it or something.
Yeah.
But Judah Benjamin, who must have been getting at least half, he's still wanted and hiding in Florida. He's going from town to town. He gets on a boat near Tampa, goes or Southwest Florida, goes around into the Caribbean, survives like 2 boat crashes, survives like a interrogation, and they rip his disguise off, and gets out of all this stuff, makes it to the Bahamas, gets money that he stashed from before, buys himself a new passport and identity, goes to England and becomes a judge and lawyer in England, and lives the rest of his life untouched, unblamed, rich as can be.
Wow.
In England. And to this day, you can go see him smirking with his English judge wig. He's got the English judge wig on and everything. And he escaped. And people say he took half. The Yulee family took half. To this day, the Yulee family, there's still Yulee, Florida, named after them. There's still Levy County, Florida, whole county. There's still Warburg Lake in Florida. All these places are still there. And essentially, what you see right there is like a messianic Jewish, almost Jewish supremacist utopia founded in Florida that directly influences the trajectory of the Civil War. And no one talks about this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Remember, they were tearing down all the statues and changing the names. They left these names up, and these are sounds like the worst people, the architects. I don't know a lot about the Revolution, but I believe that's the most Americans by far died in the Revolution, the Civil War, right? Isn't that the main? I don't know the death number, but a lot of Americans died in it.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know either, but it was a lot.
I think it was like a few 100,000 at least. It was brutal, It's like civil wars are the most brutal things when you're killing your own people and being pushed by this person with no loyalty to America, as you could see, fled back, stole our money, fled back. It's a parasite.
Well, we could talk about Jekyll Island if you want. We could talk about.
Let's do that. Let's hit a couple things. Yeah, we've been going like an hour and 45, but let's do a couple more because this is interesting. Usually I'd be wrapping up. I think we should hit 1 or 2 more things because this is it's like so many things that I haven't heard. Do you know a lot about Freemasons? I don't want to get into that today, but that could be an interesting. Because I don't know much about Freemasons, but it's like.
There's definitely people who know more about them than me, but we've got a whole section about Freemasonry here at the bookstore. I know a little bit. I know a decent amount. Not the most.
We'll do another time. Let's do a Jekyll Island because that's just a topic that I don't know that much about. I hear all these Freemasons, the 33 number, but it's not something I have an in-depth knowledge of, just like in passing. They clearly have a lot of power, but I don't understand it. Let's do the Jekyll Island. I watched a documentary you had on Jekyll Island, a little mini documentary. That was fascinating. How you can tell it better than me, stuff about Jekyll Island, because that's something recently I started looking down. It's one of the most important events in American history because this is where they took control of our money, and since then I think the dollar has lost like 99% of its value.
Yeah. No, we don't even have a dollar anymore. It's fiat currency. It's paper backed by paper, backed by nothing. It's magic. It's black magic. Usury is, historically condemned as evil and a form of magic. It's a form of hypnotism. We as, not to say that we're like animals, but we as organisms, it's so hard not to choose the short-term benefit. You know what I mean? Like, people smoke cigarettes or whatever because the short-term benefit is just so satisfying, That's kind of how the usury works, People can't say no to free money because it looks like free money at first,
but it's
and
not.
They don't realize how strong the snare is and how crippling the debt is. You know, it weighs you down, it crushes your
debt
life.
is so hard to get out. Credit card debt's like 30% or something
Yeah.
insane, and people don't. I don't think people realize that when they're buying it, they're paying like so much money in debt.
Let's tie all this in real quick. I can talk about Freemasonry real quick. Is, you know, people argue about where the Freemasons started as good, started as bad. You know, did they get taken over later? Are they really bad people? And I would just say this, what I know to be true for sure. Freemasonry legitimizes the concept of a third temple. Freemasonry is architecture. Freemasonry, it's about building, stone masonry, you know, it's the terminology and jargon of stone masonry being used as metaphorical, you know, lessons and symbolisms for self-improvement. You know, you're building a wall, you're building a building, you're building a better person. That's one of their mottos, is building better people. So they're all into building, but it's not just anything. They believe in the temple. Everything is the temple. Everything goes back to Solomon. Freemasons believe their art form, their science, their philosophies, their inner teachings go all the way back to Solomon, who built, allegedly, the first temple, you know, if we're going to call it.
They want to build it and then sacrifice the red heifer
Yeah.
and bring back the Antichrist, correct?
Yes.
And these
Now-
people really believe it. Like a lot of people, both Christian Zionists and the Jewish people there, they're actually trying to make this happen.
Well, here, we can link this into your family. You might like this, okay?
Okay.
If I may. You're like, just a Google search said Shields is essentially Irish, English, maybe Scottish. Is that like your history, your family lineage for the most
Yeah,
part?
I believe so. I don't know an exact lineage, but I believe a lot of it is Irish or Scottish and English.
Yeah. Freemasonry came out of Scotland. England, Scotland, mostly Scotland, a little bit of Ireland, but it came out of Scotland. Scotland is the most philo-Semitic country on earth. They love the Jews more than anywhere else on earth. Scotland, to
Really?
this day. Blue and white is their colors. Blue and white is the colors. The oboe is the Jewish instrument. The reeds, the bagpipes are the Scottish. You know, it's, the bearded women with skirts. You know, I think, you know, who got them started on that? You know, that seems like a humiliation ritual, is wearing a skirt all day. And
It's an interesting point, yeah.
the
I'm not
Scottish,
wearing a skirt, that's for sure.
the Scottish are in love with Judaism and Zionist. And I'm generalizing, but Scotland is the most Zionist, philo-Semitic, meaning they love Jews more than anyone else. Right next door in Ireland, you have the most anti-Semitic country on earth. Even the liberals in Ireland, even the, you know, normies in Ireland do not fuck with Zionism. Why is that? You know, I've got an Irish family too. The Irish know what it's like to be treated exactly like the Palestinians.
Interesting. That's why. 'Cause I always get Irish people coming up to me, like talking about this
Yeah.
stuff with me. I was trying to figure out why.
Yes. The Irish people know what it's like to be called a terrorist in your own backyard.
When you're defending your own property.
Exactly. Because some motherfucker brings a tank down your street, you pull out a gun, and now you're the terrorist. That is Ireland Playbook 101. That's how they created the gaslighting propaganda techniques. They had 1,000 years, if not more, to test this on Ireland. And why are we talking about Britain and Ireland? Who did the Jews use to get them? Israel. First they were using Germany, and Germany was going to help them.
That didn't
But
go so well.
England.
Well, it did help a little bit, actually, but England, yeah.
The Balfour Declaration was literally addressed, dedicated to Lord Rothschild. People can go look this up.
Yep.
They literally created like I don't know if it's a constitution or just a declaration. It's the Balfour Declaration.
Which is like paper, yeah.
It says, this is now the place for the Jewish people, and thank you, Lord Rothschild, for making it happen. And the Rothschild family still has this document
I think
framed.
it's important to add the reason the deal was they had to bring America into World War One. So it's like, why do these people have the ability to bring America into World War One? And then shortly after that, we entered World War One.
Now, the Irish know what it's like to be treated like Palestinians, okay? But let's kind of bring this all let's zoom out a little bit. I'm always going to advocate for the Palestinians, but if we zoom back far enough, there's kind of a case for them not being the original inhabitants, okay? Now, they like to use that, but they don't like who it glorifies when they explain the whole thing. There's long been a theory that the Irish, English, Scottish, Danish, Scandinavian, but especially the Celtic peoples, are descended from the Israelites in the Bible. Now, Jake Shields, is yours Jake Jacob?
Jacob Shields, yeah.
Jacob Shields. Rothschild means shield, okay? The shield, the crests of the house of David.
So I'm the real Jews.
Jake Shields, I'm going to knight you, okay? An original Israelite. Your family crest is the red lion of Judah. The Shields family crest, which is a shield. Shield is a crest. The Shields family crest is the red lion of the tribe of Judah.
So I can go take my land back.
You are more Jewish, actually Jewish, than many of these people claiming to be. There's a movement called British Israelism. This shit it's crazy.
I'll make it clear, I'm no relation to those Jews right now that are killing the kids.
No, but essentially, the Judaism of today is a small movement that grew into something larger, but still pretty small. It's the temple cult who believed in the temple and the construction of the temple, and no matter what happens, they're going to get back to building this temple. That temple cult, whose main goal is perpetual animal sacrifice till the end of days when the Antichrist comes, that's what they want England to get them Israel to do. So, England got them Israel so they can build the third temple. Why did England do it for them? Well, 400 years ago, when King James wrote, or he didn't write it, when King James essentially presided over the creation of the King James Version Bible. Did you know that King James, who was king of England, Ireland, and Scotland, believed himself to be the king of Israel?
I did not.
Why do so many people talk shit about King James and the King James Version Bible? The best Bible there's ever been in the English language. Because it's the only Bible that has ever been written from the perspective that the Celtic people are descended from the Israelites in the Bible. Now, I can prove this to you with a lot of, words and stuff like that. Like, the only dog mentioned in the Bible is the greyhound. It's the only dog mentioned by breed. Greyhounds don't come from Israel. They don't come from Iraq. They come from the British Isles. Red hair is the number one physical trait mentioned in the Bible. Red, blushing, red skin, freckles, and red hair.
Interesting.
That's Celtic people. There's a very fine line between Celtic and Jewish. Essentially, before the Muslims spread around the world, and I swear this is all going to come back, I'll close it up here soon, it all comes back to the construction of the new temple. Why did they get the British to do it for them? Because 400 years ago, the British literally thought, the leadership thought that they were also Israelites. And somewhere down the line, they thought they were going to almost have a partnership, and that's why they wanted to be in England so bad. And New York, remember we were talking about the Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean? The same thing happened in New York. It was called New Amsterdam. It was run by Jewish pirates, all this stuff. But, these were essentially like international zones of like commerce, right? International banking. There's two more that we should add to that list. I know I'm going all over the place, but
it's all right. I'm getting lots of interesting stuff. It keeps connecting. Like right now, I'm a little lost, but everything keeps connecting. So
now, the two other places I'd want to talk about. Jekyll Island was not officially part of the American United States, United States of America, until about 1947, when the state of Georgia bought it from private owners.
Privately owned?
I don't know, but the Rockefellers had a house on there. The Warburgs lived on there. All these, the Goodyear family lived on there. All this stuff. That's where they did the whole Jekyll Island thing. There's so much good content out there on Jekyll Island and all that, but
Yeah, people should definitely do some research in Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve. It's very, very complex, I think, intentionally.
yeah, it's too much to go into, but I want to bring up one more place that's just like it, that no one talks about this side of. What else happened in 1947? A certain place was opened in South Florida called Bal Harbor.
Harbor.
Bal Harbor. Baal.
Like
Ball.
the god of sacrifice.
That is the headquarters of Judaism in the southeast United States.
Really?
Bal Harbor. You can ask every single person on the street in Bal Harbor, what does Bal mean? Not a single one can tell you.
I knew right away.
There's no explanation. No explanation given. It's Bal Harbor. It's, it's 50% Jewish, 50% other people who just like to live right on the water. It's right on the water, right next to Miami Beach. Remember Remember when John McAfee died?
Yeah.
And people said that he had this kill switch?
Yeah.
Okay, in Bal Harbor, right next to Bal Harbor, they were calling it Surfside. Surfside's a little neighborhood. Bal Harbor's a little neighborhood. It's the same thing. We don't know if John McAfee actually had an apartment in this apartment complex, but I think we all remember the apartment complex that just mysteriously building 7'd into rubble.
Yeah, just wasn't hit by a plane.
In North Miami. That was in Bal Harbor. And that happened on the same night that John McAfee died.
Wow.
And it's believed that he had an apartment or information stored in this one little apartment in Bal Harbor.
And then it collapsed.
It fell. It literally...
Interesting. Yeah, he's a guy I talked to a few times. I never met him, but I chatted. He was a fight fan. So I was talking to. Obviously, I would have had him on the podcast if he was still alive. But he was the guy I chatted to. Very interesting guy.
Yeah, he's a funny guy.
Yeah, I never met him, but I had a couple phone conversations with him and texted him a few times. It's just such an interesting, very, very interesting, fascinating guy.
Sure. When that apartment building collapsed, they didn't let American response teams or like emergency teams do all the digging. Jake, I'm not even kidding. Go look this up. They literally brought in the IDF to dig through the rubble.
Way.
It's Ron DeSantis had a whole ceremony where he was like patting the IDF on the back. He's like, thanks.
How can they rationalize this? How can they bring the IDF to handle American matters? This is insane.
Dude, and you know how in Brooklyn and Manhattan they have parts where, the Orthodox Jews have their own paramedics and hospitals.
Yeah, and they'll leave Nazis to die.
I don't know about that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
They have in the past. There was riots over it years ago. I can't remember what years, but
they have those in South Florida too, especially around Bal Harbor, Hollywood. Okay, these are the places that they, essentially congregate in and have stayed in Florida, and all the things.
That's so crazy. The name,
dude, it's insane, and it was founded in 1947 with all these people who were moving around the world around 1947.
It was right after World War II. I guess there was massive, Jews come to here in Israel,
But yeah, man. Anything else you want to ask about? I'm pretty much all out.
Fascinating. Let me look real quick if there's any. I had a couple. There's so much fascinating stuff. I had questions, but now I can't think of what it was. There were several questions I had, but now they're not coming to me. There was so much interesting information.
The Chabad Lubavitch, who is the most extreme. Just to clarify, the Chabad Lubavitch, that is Bal Harbor. So when I say that's the headquarters, people are going to say, oh, which sect? It's the Chabad Lubavitch sect, which is the most messianic, the most fanatical, hardcore Zionists, and they are the ones with the tunnels and the mattresses. That's Chabad Lubavitch.
These are literally the tunnel Jews, but these are some very powerful people too. They're not just some random Jews. Basically, every president in the United States meets with them. Putin goes and meets with them. What's the Argentina guy? I think he
Milei. He met them in Bal Harbor. Look it up. When they met
so many world leaders come and meet these guys. It's like Netanyahu. They believe our souls aren't even human. It's like there's a Jewish soul and there's a non-Jewish soul. We're like not the same. We're like animals. These people, our president's going to bow to these people. Trump had to go to the grave of their head rabbi. It's fascinating, interesting stuff.
Yeah. Trump lives in Palm Beach. Epstein lives in Palm Beach. Just one last thing. Why is Palm Beach so rich and so, happening and so relevant culturally?
Why is that?
It is the place in America that comes closest to the Gulf Stream. That warm water highway that I was telling about before, that was the primary trade route and slave trade route. Palm Beach is where that warm water, that current, comes closest to the mainland.
That's why it's all warm right there.
That's why it's so nice. All the coconuts land here, and it's beautiful and nice, and yeah.
Yeah, no, it's completely fascinating conversation. I definitely want to have another one. But let's give your stuff a plug real quick, like your channel, where people can find you, you're on social media.
For sure. Old World Florida on YouTube, Old World Florida on Rumble, X. I've got a Patreon too. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, do you do a lot of interviews or no? Because I was like blown away by some of the stuff you told me today. I've never seen a podcast or anything. So I was like, wow, this is some interesting stuff.
I do a lot of interviews. We've had a lot of like guests in common or interviewers. Cam Waters, Owen Benjamin.
Owen's great too. A lot of people when I was interviewing Owen were trying to talk me out of it. They're like, he's crazy. You guys are going to get into fights. We get along great. We've never had any issues whatsoever. Went and visited his farm up in Boise. Not Boise. Where's he at? Somewhere in Idaho. It's just amazing. One of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. He has his own cheese he's making, his cows, his kids get to roam free. It was just like, I was mind blown by how beautiful his place is. Such a cool dude. He tried wrestling. He made the mistake of trying to wrestle me, though, and I was beating up his kids and had to put him in check real quick.
Put him in a pretzel?
He's like, oh, fuck, I didn't expect that. He's like, I'm a lot bigger than you. I thought I was going to have, like, some chance. I'm like, no.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Owen. He's a great guy.
Who else you say hi?
He's always been nice to me. I thought he was going to hate me too, but maybe he does. But he's a great guy.
I think he's just one of those guys. If he gets it with you, if he sees something that's unjust, he'll go after you. And then sometimes he gets like on these like rants where he might go after you for like 2 weeks, so it makes him look crazier than he is. But it's humor to him. It's like not serious. Yeah. Like my producer and him got like in a big Twitter fight. My producer's like, "Oh, he's not going to like me." And I'm like, "Bro, he doesn't care." He came in and Owen's like, "I don't care." He's like, "Oh." He's like, but I was being like pretty personal and stuff. I'm like, yeah, Owen doesn't care. Just trust me. So he came in, they got along fine. He's like, he doesn't take the online world serious, which is how I am too.
Totally.
So, well, hey man, that was excellent. So we'll stay in touch and thanks again.
For sure, Jake. Thanks for having me.
As many of you know, I have many controversial guests, so that comes at a cost of being demonetized everywhere. So if you want to support the program, go to fightbackpodcast.com, and I have all kinds of merch on there, whether it's jiu-jitsu, fighting, political, and other accessories. And thanks for the support.